Welcome back to the Jumpify Labs podcast. On today's episode, we're tackling a challenge that every business leader faces: the illusion of control. From employee turnover to managing your own time, your own purpose, the idea of control is usually more slippery than it seems. Today's guest has one of the more unique leadership journeys that I've come across. Ruth Easterling went from being an ordained Methodist minister to building a coaching practice helping executives and entrepreneurs rediscover their purpose and their leadership voice. Ruth, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
It's a pleasure. Pleasure's all mine. Ruth, can you start off by just sharing a bit about where you grew up and how your journey led you into leadership and coaching?
Yeah. So I actually grew up in Seattle and later I went on to move to Kentucky where I went to Asbury Theological Seminary. And like you shared, I have a master's of divinity degree. And then I went on to pastor a church in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And then at the end of my almost 10 years, I had my second daughter, and life was a little chaotic. And my husband was looking for a job so we could move back to Seattle where I was from. And so we went back there and I quit my full-time job. And it was through a process when my daughter went to kindergarten. I was actually an adjunct professor at Seattle Pacific University and a process of teaching and doing a bunch of different things. And I finally decided that I really wanted to help people become better leaders because we live in a culture that is deficit of quality leaders and also coaching because I'd done tons of that for like 30 years. And so I thought, well, I'll take a stab at the entrepreneur world. So that's kind of how I ended up in coaching and leadership training.
Amazing. And then your experience as a Methodist minister, how has that actually shaped how you coach today?
It really helps a lot with the way I work with people. I actually was coaching people from the get-go, back in the days when I started my job as a pastor, and I had no idea. And actually, the best story I love telling is when a friend of mine from seminary called me up because we had been talking and I was trying to figure out like what should be my next step in life. And she said, "You should think about coaching." And I said, "What's coaching?" So I literally took a class on what is coaching, and this was back in, 2019 and before I started my business, so
Okay, very cool. Yeah, coaching is not just sports. That's what we think
no.
about often. Is just like, oh, my football coach, my jujitsu coach, whatever. But
Right.
yes, through these different challenges in life, I mean, it's always helpful to have someone there kind of helping you navigate because they kind of pave the way, kind of help you get to the end goal that much faster.
No, I was just gonna add is, that coaching is so different from counseling because I always tell my clients I'm not a counselor. So, because counselors deal with your past, coaching deals with today. And I'm also not a consultant, although I do consult business leaders because that's kind of more of my specialty. But I'm not a consultant. So if you I have a client who's an architect. I'm not going to help her with her architectural business. I'm going to help, I'm a coach through her, her team and her.
Yeah. So you were also a minister and you've also been a teacher. Now you're a coach. You differentiate from counselor. Which of these titles do you feel like is most important for the people? How can I say this? They're all really important. Like
Well,
which
they
one of
are.
those, yeah, and which one do you feel like gives the biggest impact?
Well, obviously for a different reason, each one of them has a really important role. But when you're a coach, I think that the best thing that I can do is to sit with someone and listen to them and then be able to be their accountability partner, their thinking partner, and helping them to move to the next stage. A lot of my clients are stuck, whether they're just, I mean, and some of it, they don't even know what they're stuck in. And so one of the things we do is we try to how to figure out where you're stuck and then how to get unstuck and then how to move to the next phase of life or whatever it is.
Yeah. And a lot of times we feel like we're stuck because we cannot control the outcomes that we want to have. So, why do you believe so many people are actually struggling with the concept of control?
Well, I think there's two reasons. The first reason is that we're human beings and we want to be in control, right? We want to control our lives. We want to control our children's lives. We want to control the people at our work, their lives, right? And the situation. And so some of those you can control. But the one thing that you have to learn, and this is what I try and help my clients learn, is that the one thing that you can control is you. And so by learning how to control you is the first and the best step. And so whether that's your time management, whether that's understanding your purpose and what your future looks like, but that's where you have to begin.
Right. And you mentioned when we first spoke that this whole illusion of control and kind of giving free to it happened with a story with your daughter. Do you want to touch on
Yes.
that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So back when my daughter was in 5th grade, I'm sorry, let me go back. Back when she was in 3rd grade, she was really having struggling with reading. And I was like, "Oh, I just cannot believe that this is that hard," right? And I have a lot of education in my background, and my other child had learned how to read, my older daughter, and so I thought, "This cannot be that hard." And so what I decided to do was I was gonna homeschool her for a year. And so I started doing that, and I thought, I'll just kinda like then she'll get more individualized attention, and then I'll just really help her, and we'll get this done. And so I did that, and I'll never forget her looking at me when she was about to start school the next year, and she said, "Mom, I don't I don't wanna homeschool anymore." And I thought this was so great." And she goes, "Mom, I really wanna go back to school." And at one moment, I began to see that I was trying to control her, and I was trying to control the situation, and through a process of her going back into school, I began to realize that it's really wasn't about me. It was really about trying to help her to get to be where she was. So there was a whole control issue with me and why I thought I was just so good and I could be able to help her.
Yeah. So and then you being able to let go, what was the effect of you letting go of control? How did that affect you and maybe your daughter?
Well, first of all, it helped me because I began to stop caring about every last little thing about her and what she was accomplishing. How well was she reading? How was she doing it? And then, but it also gave my daughter freedom to become her. And that next year, it was hard as far as like school went, but the opportunities that she had, I mean, I never in a million years could have figured that one out, on my own. I mean, some friendships that she made. She ended up being on this cute little dance team in the elementary school. It was, the PE teacher chose her to be one of the captains of this PE thing that he did, and, I mean, it's just like all these other little elements that there's just no way if I had kept my control on the situation, any of those things could have happened.
Right. And then that was something an example in your personal life. How often or maybe some examples of how you're seeing the illusion of control show up in some of the executives you work with?
Yeah, yeah, so, one of the things that I found, like, with time management is that individuals think especially if you are like a CEO or you're solo entrepreneur, and I say this because they tend to be individuals who have a ton of things going on and life depends on and I was actually just talking to a doctor who had a lot going on. I mean, he's in the hospital, he has his clinic, he has a lot going on. And I finally looked at him and said, "What are you trying to control?" And he's like, "Well, my schedule, of course." And I said, "No, I think it's a little bit deeper than that because you have an assistant who could be doing half of this work." And so basically we had to break it down that he didn't really like the way that she did it. And then I was like, "Okay, do you need a new assistant?" I mean, so there's different problems that came from the control that he was trying to have.
Right. And then what's the cost of business when leaders can not let go of control?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even with this person, is that the cost well, one is your health. Obviously, he was just way in a sense, out of control, his lack of being with his family. And the third thing was he actually could make more money if he could figure out how to give it up. And right at first, sometimes it doesn't look like you're going to because now you gotta hire this person, you gotta do this. But what they do is they multiply your time. They don't add, they multiply.
Exactly. The delegation piece, right? It's like when we try to do it all ourselves because we somehow think, no one can do it better than me. We end up lighting the flame on both sides of the candle and we end up burning ourselves out.
Right.
Yeah. So why do you say leadership is less about you then personally and more about actually building the teams that can actually thrive without you?
Yeah, right. Because leadership is really about leaving a legacy with people. And leadership, let me take it back a notch or a step, is that the first thing that I really believe about leadership is that it's all about influence. And so if you're a leader, you are influencing someone. And, in reality, when we talk about influencing, you can be influencing somebody for a negative reason just as well as you can be influencing them for a positive reason. So our goal as a leader is to be influencing our people for a positive reason. And we all are leaders, right? Whether we're leaders as parents or even middle management, the people who are around you, you are still influencing those people above you, below you, beside you. And when you've been put in place to be a leader of, let's just say, a small crew of, 3, 4 people, it really, you can just make a decision. You can either lead from like a power position or you can lead and come alongside of people and work side by side with them. And when we work side by side with people, we begin to impact them in a real way. And the goal is to lead and leave a legacy. So in which you'll lead for a while, but then as you impact them, they will begin to learn to lead also. And then
Mhm.
we could they'll be doing what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a really key component of leadership is, of course, communication. And you've worked with many clients. And then some clients, I'm sure, stand out in as far as how they can communicate. In your view, though, what does great leadership communication actually look like? Or maybe sound like?
Well, that's a really good question. One of the things that I teach is really about humility and communicate. And the very first thing a great leader does is they listen. And then the second thing a really great leader does is that they ask questions. And it's really not about how great of a speaker you are or how out front of everyone else you are. It's really about your heart and how you care about the other person and finding that place for common ground and where you walk in and listen to the other person and you understand where the other person is coming from. See, it's not about your agenda and or let's just say for instance me as a leader, it's not about me getting my point across. It's not about me trying to sound as the expert in the field. It's really about me understanding you and listening to you and connecting with you on a place of common ground where we can work together and understand each other and learn from each other and learn to communicate.
Amazing. Right. Okay. And then as someone who's also coaching both executives that are working with a lot of, well, decent sized
Yeah.
teams, and then you have the solo entrepreneurs who are working usually by themselves or maybe a smaller team of maybe it's like 2 to 3. What differences are you seeing in how they approach leadership? Because they're still on the one on the top, but then it's a different dynamic.
Yeah, right. No, totally. It's really interesting. I just have to give this kind of illustration of one of my clients. When he came to me to work with me, he wanted to learn how to communicate, right? So like I actually do a class specifically on this because a lot of people think that they know how to communicate and all they know how to do is talk, right? And so he is like, oh, I got to learn how to do this better. And the first thing that he did was when he'd walk into the room, and he'd do the right things because he'd been taught through sales, right? To look at your shirt or look at the pants or look at something about you. And he'd comment on that. But the very next thing that he would do is he'd make a joke. And I was like, people don't connect there. So, and it was really interesting because what I found is that people who have, let's shall we say, smaller, like 1 or 2 people that they interact with, is that the common pitfall, and this probably isn't quite answering your question, but the common pitfall of what people do when they only have 2 or 3 people that they lead from is they tend to lead and communicate from their point of reference. And so it ends up becoming, because I've seen this happen over and over again, is that when you're leading from your point or you're understanding your point of reference, you're leaving out every single other person who's in the group. And it tends to be that when you lead to a small group of people, it's actually nicer than, the leader with 20 or 50 people that they're leading. When you have 2 or 3 people, you can get to know each person individually. And then you can learn how to connect with each person individually, understanding their personality type, what different types are they, understanding what things they like, what's their kids' names, how they interact. And so by understanding each person individually, you are going to have a greater impact on that team than somebody who has 60, 70 people that they're leading. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely does for sure. It gives you, yeah, smaller teams, of course, you have more face time with a smaller team, so it gives you the opportunity to get to know them on a more personal level.
Right.
Of course, I imagine the idea would be to grow a little bit bigger. You take advantage of it while you got it, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Right. I mean, you don't want to, and none of us should stay where we are forever.
Yeah,
That's not good.
right. And then you have your Purpose Journey program, which is a 6-month program that you're walking clients through. Share a little bit about the transformations you've seen with clients after working through your program.
Yeah. So it's really kind of fun because we really take a deep dive into awareness, understanding who you are and where you're at, and like some of the journeys that you've been on to get you to this place. And so it's been fun to be able to see how individuals, as they're learning, and about, I would say about month 3, they begin to say, "Oh my word, this is what I like. I like." I like doing this, fill in the blank versus that. And so as they sit there and they look at it, they go, maybe I should change my job. And I always tell them, don't change your job. Let's work through the 6 months, and then you can start thinking about, if you want to change your job or if you want to do something different, or the way you spend your time. And so it's been really fun because most everyone I've worked with has either changed their perspective on their job, or they've changed, like one of my clients changed a job within a job. And then, a lot of them have actually changed jobs.
And then for you personally, I know you're dealing with a lot of clients, but and I know you're also building your own business. What's maybe one recent challenge or a current challenge you're looking to overcome within your own business? Either past or current, either one.
Okay, well, that's all right. I think, I mean, there's I have a lot, but the first one is probably my biggest challenge right now is I am running a leadership conference in my town. And so I am having to promote it, sell tickets, get people to come. And this year, I did it last year kind of on a small scale. This year, I wanted to kind of increase the scale. And so I'm going to be speaking, and I have some very high profile name people coming in virtually. And so it's a challenge just to sell the tickets and get people on board to come. Let's say it that way.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's always for any business, it's about getting more clients and customers in. So yeah, it's going to be kind of a challenge, I guess, throughout our careers in business whenever we're
Yeah,
working
for
with people.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I want to talk a little bit about just the leadership aspect again. How do you actually measure the ROI in leadership training, both, I guess, in business outcome and in personal growth?
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a great question. It took me a while to try to figure this one out because, you're impacting people. And so you're like, oh, well, how many people do you want to impact? And so I mean, the ROI ends up being kind of the same as every other business, right? You need X amount of clients to get X amount of results, right? And so I think I have, at first, all I want to do is impact people. But the more I impacted people, the more I realized that people really needed the services that I had. And so it was a growth journey for me. So, I mean, the bottom line, you need so many clients to get so much done. And as I've done it, I do a variety of things. From I have a membership level, I have a small group coaching level, and I also have individual clients, if that makes sense. As well as if you kind of go to you from individual, I kind of do 2 buckets. So individual clients, and then I do leadership training clients. And so that's more where I get into my businesses and
Mm,
kind of a different bucket.
gotcha. Okay. And then as far as you mentioned the word growth, which this is a growth podcast, where do you see the whole space of leadership development? Where do you see it heading, growing to maybe in the next, I don't know, 5 years or so?
Where my growth is going or where it in general?
In general, yeah, in general.
Well, my hope is that, especially in the United States, my hope is that individuals and businesses will begin to see that leadership's really important, that we lack leadership on, you know, I don't want to just say politically, we definitely lack it there, but we lack it in our society. And so what I'm hoping is that the more we talk about leadership and the more we begin to share that leadership is really important, regardless if you're a parent or you're a business owner or you're working at the local McDonald's. And that I hope and I believe that if we continue, shall we say, to beat the drum on leadership, that people will begin to see that it's really about them because every person is impacted by leadership. My hope is that people will begin to not just say, "Oh yeah, I've been given this leadership position at work," which really is just management with a leadership sticker on top of it. And I hope that people will begin to see that it's really important to invest your time, invest your growth into becoming a better leader.
And you're doing that as well from your podcast, Empowering Women to Lead. What kind of guests and topics do you feature?
Well, so far we have had a variety of types of women, but the greatest ones have been the ones who kind of are at the top of, so we say, of industries, kind of the top 20%. And what we found is that most of the women who are in these levels, like superintendent of schools, a president of a university, we soon will have an astronaut. She's going to be talking, and we have pilot. So just women who literally are at the top, but yet there's not a lot of women up there, if that makes sense. So those are kind of the ones I've been focusing on, and then a lot of it's been STEM related also.
I got you. Wow. Okay. So if someone listening today feels like they're maybe out of control, what's one small step they can take this week to start turning that around?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is to come to awareness of where they are out of control and then identify that and then begin to look at how can I help myself go to, shall we say, the next level. So, like for instance, if you wanted to, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy. One of the things that I always give anyone who reaches out to me is a 30-minute free consultation, just to be able to help an individual to identify where is this out of control thoughts or feelings coming from? And then the other thing too, you always reach out to a friend and begin to take a deeper dive into understanding what am I feeling? Where am I going? And if it's a pretty obvious one, then it's time to do something about it.
I would just also say if you are reaching out to your friends, ideally they're in a place you want to be, or
Yes.
at least have some kind of thing figured out that you want to figure out yourself. Because friends are good to listen, but not all friends are good for advice.
Yes. Good point.
Yeah. Ruth, can you just share the best way for listeners to actually connect with you online?
Yeah, you can come to my website, and that's at www.rutheasterling, so my full name, .org. And then if you go in there, you can email me. There's like a little form at the bottom and just say, "Hey, I heard you on the podcast." You can also email me at rutheasterling.org. I'd be happy. Just say you heard me on the podcast, and I'd be happy to have a little conversation with you. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Ruth. This has been a fun conversation. I love the energy you bring. I know we spoke earlier, and then it's just been the same throughout this conversation we've had here on the actual recording part of it. For anyone listening, if you like stories like this, if you want to interact and maybe learn from other stories from other leaders just like Ruth, make sure you tune in. Each episode, ideally, is a banger just like this one. I'm Jay. Thanks so much for listening. Talk soon.
Thanks, Jay.